And it came to my mind this morning, and we were on a Saturday night. We were picking, and then 10 o'clock came by, and I looked at the clock. We're still picking. 11, we're still picking. 12, we're still picking. And then at 1, he finally looked at me and he said, "Do you need to stop and study your lesson?" No, I think we'll go. I think we're good. and And then I have memories. I don't know why I will always remember this, but he started riding his bicycle in the neighborhood and he bought a pink helmet. And he's riding around town, around the area with a pink helmet. And one of his grandsons said, "Granddad," he said, "that thing is pink." He said, "You can see that a mile away." He said, "That's the reason I bought it." Um, Cliff probably fits the mold for what we're going to talk about this morning as well as anybody I know. October 24th, that was a Wednesday night, about a week and a half ago, Scott taught the lesson about Ruth. And as he went along, he came to a point where he's talking about her characteristics. And he said, one of her characteristics, she was an humble person. And something then, I don't know if he said it off the cuff, if he had it in his notes, but he said, humbleness, it's going to be one of them days. Humbleness can go a long way. And boy, I wrote that down as soon as he said it. Humbleness can go a long way. And that's the title of the lesson this morning. Colossians 3:12. Put on, therefore, as the elect of God, holy and beloved, bowels of mercies, kindness, humbleness of mind, meekness, long suffering. There you have the only time the word humbleness is mentioned in the King James Version. Humility, humble many times. That's the only time humbleness is mentioned. However, Acts 20:19 refers to serving the Lord with all humility of mind. There is the same reference, the same word used for humbleness in Colossians 3:12. Ephesians 4:2, with all lowliness and meekness, with long suffering, forbearing one another in love. There again, lowliness being the same word as humbleness. Philippians 2:3, let nothing be done through strife or vainglory, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem other better than themselves. There again, lowliness, the very same word. And there are others, but we stop there with that example. But other verses about humbleness, Proverbs 16:19, better it is to be of an humble spirit with the lowly than to divide the spoil with the proud. And Proverbs 29:23, a man's pride shall bring him low, but honor shall uphold the humble in spirit. James 4:10, humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, and he shall lift you up. And James 4:6, God resisteth the proud, but giveth grace unto the humble. Proverbs 27:2, let another man praise thee, and not thine own mouth, a stranger, and not thine own lips. Obviously, you know why we read those. Humbleness goes a long way. Many of, many of us may not pay much attention to humbleness from ourselves or others. And that's a natural thing to do that. Or at least I guess I can speak for myself. Oftentimes we think of the humble person, the person who is quiet and unassuming. And that may not always be the case, but it fits in with what we normally think of an humble individual, one that doesn't say much, when it's lowly in mind, is what the definition turns out to be. But I think of people, just, I don't know why off the cuff, I think of a few people that I've known over the years that were quiet and unassuming and humble, I suppose. But once you push them to their limit, then they were dangerous to deal with. I remember one example of in the fire service. This guy fit this description. He never said much. He just did his job. He was minding his own business. And the captain in the station started agitating him and aggravating him and finally made him mad. And he chased the guy around with a knife for 10 minutes trying to catch him. And when they finally broke it up, they moved him. They didn't let him stay with that captain any longer. And so you never know what you're dealing with. When you're talking about an humble person, you're not talking about a person that won't break. And there is a time when we need to break. Romans 12:2. For I say, through the grace given unto me, to every man that is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think soberly, according as God hath dealt to everyone the measure of faith. And we're emphasizing, obviously, not to think of oneself more high than he ought to think. The humble person doesn't even think himself to be as good as or better than anybody else, much less say it. You heard that. The humble person doesn't even think themselves to be better than anybody else. And if you think it, it shows. If you think it, it shows. Somebody said one time that, and I didn't make a note of who said this, pride is your greatest enemy, humility is your greatest friend. And then somebody else said, if you think you are humble, you're not. Synonyms for humbleness would be constraint, demureness, decency, down-to-earthness, lowliness, meekness, and modesty. Antonyms are arrogance, swagger, boastfulness, chest-thumping, self-centered, conceit, and vanity. We know people who fit both descriptions. And, those who are arrogant and boastful and self-centered and chest-thumping, it doesn't take you long to get all of that you want. It doesn't take very long for you to want to distance yourself from that person. Humbleness goes a long way. Humbleness is the absence of any feeling of being better than others. We've already almost said that. Humbleness credits others, an humble person credits others for success. They're unselfish along those lines. It's been said that people don't climb the ladder of success without stepping on somebody. But that doesn't have to be true according to God. A person can be successful and still be an humble person, giving other people credit for helping him or her. We've all been, if we have any degree of success in our careers or hope to be, then we've all had help from others, whether you give them credit or not. The humble person will. Humbleness goes a long way in regard to our influence. It's been said many times here that we have influence. It's either good or bad. Don't consider anything in between. It's either good or bad. And in regard to humbleness, we are either humble or we're not, and it does affect our influence. We just got through saying that the arrogant person, the boastful person, his influence goes a long way. People don't want to be around him after a while. We've the career that we've had, that I had, that Matt and John have, they see both of these on a regular basis. They see the arrogant, they deal with the arrogant, they deal with the humble. Even on fire alarms, you deal with both. You'll run into some who are just impossible to deal with. They'll tell you how to fight the fire themselves. They'll tell you what needs to be done to this patient themselves. Humbleness goes a long way with our influence. Humbleness goes a long way in prayer. Prayer from an arrogant, boastful, egotistical individual will normally be hard to follow. They'll use words that I don't know. You don't have time to look words up when a person is leading the prayer. I distinctly remember at a singing, they called on a preacher to lead the prayer before the singing started. I'm thinking it was at Swearingen, but I may be wrong about that. I'd never heard of the preacher and haven't heard of him since, and because of his prayer, I don't want to. I didn't understand a word he said, other than our Father in heaven. Past that, I didn't understand him. I could not. He is the prayer leader is to pray, leading, if I'm in the audience, leading me in prayer. I'm supposed to understand what he says. If I can't understand what he says, I'm not being led in prayer. And if I have presence of mind, I'll just say my own and let him be. And that's what we had to do with that man. Pray in a way that others can follow. Vain repetition, worthless phrases are not needed in prayer. And I won't go into vain repetition as far as giving you an example of one, but I will tell you this. You have to be careful when you tell people what to say in prayer. Bill Estes taught a class from this very pulpit many years ago, teaching men how to pray. And at the end of his class, there were two men who never led another prayer. They used the phrases, often they used the phrases that he told them shouldn't be used. And they had grown up as Christians using those phrases, and they didn't realize there was anything wrong with them, and there probably wasn't anything wrong with them. It's just repeating the same thing. But anyway, humbleness goes a long ways with our success. It goes a long way with influence. Humbleness goes a long way in prayer. I'll overlook this example in regard to influence. The power or capacity of causing an effect in indirect or intangible ways, to sway, to have an effect on spiritual matters and moral force, to give off can't think of the word I want. Anyway, there you have influence. Humbleness goes a long way with God. 1 Peter 5, 6 and 7. Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due times, casting all your care upon him, for he careth for you. Verse 5 of that sequence says, God resisteth the proud and giveth grace to the humble. Do you get out of those three verses, that humbleness goes a long ways with God? Proverbs 15:33. The fear of the Lord is the instruction of wisdom, and before honor is humility. I'm going to 1 Kings. I'm going to chapter 21. And this sequence is about Ahab. He was the king that had married Jezebel, and things were not. He was not doing things right, and he had been threatened or told what was going to happen to him. Verse 26 for 25 of that sequence says, "But there was none like unto Ahab, which did sell himself to work wickedness in the sight of the Lord, whom Jezebel his wife stirred up. And he did very abominably in following idols, according to all things as did the Amorites, whom the Lord cast out before the children of Israel. And it came to pass, when Ahab heard these words, that he rent his clothes and put sackcloth upon his flesh and fasted and lay in sackcloth and went softly. And the word of the Lord came to Elijah the Tishbite, saying, Seest thou how Ahab humbleth himself before me? Because he humbleth himself before me, I will not bring the evil in his days. But in his son's days will I bring the evil upon his house. Now, if you are listening and you've heard what we're saying, humbleness goes a long way with God. There is another perfect example, because Ahab, for that period of time, became an humble person. He gave himself up, and God said, okay, we'll not bring that evil on him. Humbleness goes a long ways with God. Humbleness goes a long way with Christ. All one has to do is consider the life of Christ, his lifestyle, his work, his day-to-day activities and interaction with those who persecuted him. And he was humble all the way. He said in 5:30 of the book of John, I can of mine own self do nothing. As I hear, I judge, and my judgment is just. And here's the reason: because I seek not my own will, but the will of the Father which hath sent me. He was humble. Humbleness went a long way with Christ. I'm going to Philippians chapter 2. beginning with verse 5. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who being in the form of God, thought it not robbery to be equal with God, but made himself of no reputation, and took upon him the form of a servant, and was made in the likeness of men. And being found in fashion as a man, he humbled himself, and became obedient unto death, even the death of the cross. Wherefore God also hath highly exalted him, and given him a name which is above every name. Why was that? He humbled himself. And even with Christ, humbleness went a long ways with God. Humbleness goes a long ways with our giving. I'm going to Matthew chapter 6. Beginning with verse 1, reading through verse 4. Take heed that ye do not your alms before men to be seen of them. Otherwise ye have no reward of your Father which is in heaven. Therefore, when ye doest thine alms, do not sound the trumpet before thee, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may have glory of men. Verily I say unto you, they have their reward. But when thou doest alms, let not thy left hand know what thy right hand doeth, that thine alms may be in secret, and thy Father which seeth in secret shall reward thee openly. Now we realize that alms was under the old law leading up to the Christian dispensation, where they gave to the poor, gave to the needy. That was called giving their alms. And obviously you can see from that text that they were not to do it to show out, not to do it where people will see, oh boy, did you see what they did for that person? And not to boast about it. The same goes for giving as we've been prospered. We've said before here that it is a personal matter between me and God. It's not for me to show you how much I give or you to show me. It's none of my business what you give. It is our business as elders that you do give and that we give, but not how much. So humbleness goes a long way with giving. And there are lots of examples you might consider there. I have memories of times when very few people gave paper money. But even at that, as the contribution plate came by, people with change would lay it into the basket. They didn't want to drop it where it'd make a racket, or you would know that they were giving change. I've seen that happen. I've done that, as a matter of fact. Even though the person given the change was given all they could give, it was still an embarrassment to them. And I have another memory about giving, if you don't mind me sharing memories this morning. I was a boy that I sat next to in almost every service out at Friendship. His name is Keith. It was Keith Kay. He's passed. Keith put a $50, big $50 in every Sunday morning. I watched him clunk win a $50. I wanted to give a $50 so bad. Didn't have a $50 to give. Mother couldn't give me a $50 to give. She didn't have one to give herself. But yeah, I was influenced by that $50. I wanted to give one really bad. Humbleness goes a long ways with God, with Christ, with giving, and in marriage. Humbleness goes a long ways in marriage. Ephesians 5:25, husbands love your wife. Colossians 3:19, husbands love your wife. Titus 2:4, teach your young women to be sober, love husband, and love the children. Love is a key word, but humbleness is putting each other first. You love the person, put them first. Humbleness is acknowledging weakness and strength. You know the person's weaknesses. Help him, help her. You know the person's strength, encourage them. Humbleness goes a long ways in marriage. Humbleness will accept advice from each other. Humbleness will admit when it's wrong. That's a good one for a married couple, isn't it? Admit when you're wrong. Humbleness goes a long way when offering and accepting forgiveness. Humbleness goes a long way when not gloating or criticizing. Told you so. Have you ever done that? Yeah, you have and you will. You've heard many lessons and from Bill and every other preacher that you've ever sat before as they preached about these topics, and especially marriage. But again, love goes a long ways and obviously must be. But you can love a person and not be humble and not forgive them. You can love a person and not put them first because you love yourself more. You can love a person and not try to strengthen them because you're too busy strengthening yourself. You can love a person and not offer, accept advice from them because you don't think you need advice. Humbleness goes a long ways in marriage. Humbleness goes a long ways with the church, in the church. I have 1 Peter. I'm going to 1 Peter 5. And we're reading 1 through 5. The elders which are among you I exhort, who am also an elder, and a witness of the suffering of Christ, and also a partaker of the glory that shall be revealed. Feed the flock of God which is among you, taking the oversight thereof, not by constraint, but willingly, not for filthy lucre, but of a ready mind, neither as being lords over God's heritage, but being examples to the flock. And when the chief shepherd shall appear, ye shall receive a crown of glory that fadeth not away. Likewise, ye younger, submit yourselves unto the elder. Yea, all of you be subject one to another, and be clothed with humility. For God resisteth the proud, and giveth grace to the humble. Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time. He is writing to the church there somewhere. And when he said, likewise, ye younger, he's obviously writing to the elders. And then he says, the younger men, or the younger, submit yourselves to the elder. And then he says, yea, all of you be subject one to another. Who would that be? All of you. Would that not be the congregation, all the people? He's saying to all the people, be ye humble, because God giveth grace to the humble. Humbleness goes a long ways in the church. Humbleness goes a long way with God. Now, It was said once here, I can't remember the lady's name who said it, and it was during the time when there was a lot of excitement and a lot of worry about the liberal element moving in to different congregations, and we were being compared by ourselves to other congregations, I guess. Anyway, this woman said, one doesn't have to be a member of the East Huntsville Church to be saved. Well, obviously that's true. One doesn't have to be a member of the East Huntsville Church of Christ to be saved. There are other congregations in town. Some are questionable, no doubt. But personally, it's all questionable because of things I've heard. I don't know any of it. I haven't been there. I don't know what they do. I care, but not enough to go see. So I'm saying all that to say, East Huntsville is not the only scriptural congregation. And we need to be humble enough to not make people think that we are. We need to be humble enough to not make people think that we think we're the only ones right in Huntsville. Because that's just as wrong as it can be if that's what we think. Now, I'm going to say something here that, again, is something that I've heard. I did not hear the woman say this. A preacher's wife in this town said their congregation was the only scriptural congregation in Huntsville. Now, if that congregation has that attitude, their humbleness is somewhere else. The congregation of God's people must be humble. We should be careful in the congregation, in the church, to never abuse a kind, humble person. You may never be offered one again. Did you hear that? Be careful not to abuse a kind, humble person. You may never run up on one. You may not often run up on one, put it that way. Be careful how we treat people, visitors, newcomers. Be careful how we treat people. That note, I should have read that in its entirety. Never abuse a kind, humble heart. You may never be offered one again. Be careful how you treat people. That came from Melissa, can't call her last name, at the Shiloh congregation. It was Tammy Sanders' sister-in-law. It is. As a group or congregation, we know that we're not better than anyone else that might come through our doors, or any group of people we may reach out to. We need to know that. We believe that. We're humble enough to know that we're not better than anybody else. We don't just serve those who are like us, or those we are comfortable with, or just people who are already in our group. We also serve the lowly. Christ said in Matthew 9:12, I came not to call the righteous but the sinners. Humbleness goes a long ways with the church, with Christ, with God, in prayer, with our giving, in marriage, and our way of life. Any comments? Thank you, lights.